Huainanzi Chapter 17.1 To apply the standards of a bygone era in governing the world today is like a passenger in a boat who lost his sword in midstream. Right away he made a mark on the boat, intending to come back at night to look for the sword. His lack of knowledge of how to sort things out was certainly profound. Now to follow the footprints in one small corner of the world and not to know how to wander in accord with heaven and earth, no confusion can be greater than that. Just because something is suitable for a particular time is not enough to make it valuable always. It can be compared with making earthen dragons in time of drought or making sacrificial straw dogs during an epidemic. They are sovereign only at a particular time. 17.2 The torn remnants of a baby's swaddling cloth. 1 are of value for treating bites of the chew insect, 2 but it is not the jade half-disc of the Xiahe clan. 17.3 It has no antiquity and no present, no beginning and no end. Before there were yet heaven and earth, it generated heaven and earth. It is the profoundly subtle and expansively grand. 17.4 Where feet tread is shallow, but we must rely on where we do not tread before we can walk. What a knowledgeable person knows is narrow, but we must rely on what we do not know before we can understand. 17.5 A swimmer uses his feet to kick and his hands to sweep through the water. But if you have not mastered the technique of swimming, the more you kick, the more you will get into trouble. When you do learn to swim, it is not just a matter of hands and feet. 17.6 Birds fly back to their home, rabbits return to their burrow, dying foxes head for their lair, gnats hover over the water. All things rely on what bring them into being. 17.7 One does not give a mirror to a person who has lost his sight, one does not give a pair of shoes to a person who has lost a foot, one does not give a ceremonial cap to a person from you, they are of no use to them. 17.8 Although a hammer has a handle, it cannot pound itself, although eyes can see 100 paces away, they cannot see their own eyelids. 17.9 Dogs and pigs do not eat from plates and cups. Carelessly they fatten their bodies, consequently self-regard hastens their own deaths. Phoenixes fly more than 1,000 ren for high, consequently, no one can reach them. 17.10 The moon illuminates the sky, but it is swallowed by the toad. 5 The deng 6 reptile wanders in the fog, but it is endangered by the cricket. The crow's strength vanquishes the sun, but it submits to the zuaza bird. 7 Things can possess both strengths and weaknesses. 17.11 No one lives longer than a child who dies in infancy, ancestor pen was short-lived. 8 17.12 If the rope is short, it cannot be used to draw water from the depths, if the implement is small, it cannot be used on things that are abundantly large. It is not within its capacity. 17.13 Anger arises from non-anger, action arises from non-action. 17.14 Look for the formless and you will see what you look for. Listen for the soundless and you will hear what you listen for. 17.15 The best flavor does not satiate, the highest language does not embellish. The highest joy does not elicit laughter, the loftiest sound does not call out. The greatest artist does not chop, the greatest cook does not carve, the greatest hero does not fight. 9 When you attain the way, its potency follows. This is like the correspondence of the pitch pipe note yellow bell and the pentatonic note gong, or the correspondence of the pitch pipe note great budding and the pentatonic note shang. Their consonants cannot be altered. 17.16 If someone is gambling for a piece of tile, his pace will be measured. If he is gambling for gold, he will be excited. If he is gambling for jade, he will be very ill at ease. For this reason, if what you value is external, then what is internal will be dulled. 17.17 When you pursue a wild animal, your eyes will not notice Mount Tai. When you crave and desire something external, your perception will be impaired. 17.18 Those who hear the sound of a sound are deaf. Those who hear the sound of no sound are discerning. Those who are neither deaf nor discerning have penetrated through to spirit illumination. 17.19 The diviner grasps the tortoise shell, the shaman arranges the milfoil slips. When inquiring about their calculations, how can it be numbers that we ask about? 17.20 Those who are dancing set the beat while those sitting unconsciously clap their hands in unison. What brings them to that point is the same. 17.21 The sun rises in the bright valley and sets in the abyss of anxiety. 11 No one is aware of its movements, but in a moment's time it turns your head around. 17.22 No one wants to learn to ride a dragon, but everyone wants to learn to ride a horse. No one wants to learn to rule ghosts, but everyone wants to learn to rule men. People hasten after what is of use. 17.23 To dismantle a gate to make firewood, to plug a well to make a mortar. When people do things, sometimes they are that stupid. 12 17.24 Water and fire repel each other, but when a small cauldron lies between them, the 5 flavors are harmonized. Bone and flesh 13 attract each other, but when slander intervenes, the father-son relationship is threatened. 17.25 Now when the means by which you nurture something harms what you nurture, it is like shaving the foot to fit the shoe or trimming the head to fit the hat. 17.26 Calamus repels fleas and lice but attracts centipedes. 14 It alleviates a minor irritation but invites a great harm. Thus small pleasures can undermine significant benefits. 17.27 A collapsing wall does not compare with one that does not collapse. 15 But it is better than a falling down house. 17.28 That the Bian jade ritual objects become implements is due to the merits of the grit. 16 That the moist sword cuts so cleanly is due to the strength of the whetstone. 17.29 When the cunning rabbit is caught, the hunting dog is cooked. When the high-flying bird is shot down, the strong crossbow is put into storage. 17.30 The gadflies that accompany a thoroughbred go 1,000 li but do not fly. They do not have stores of grain, yet they do not starve. 17.31 Suppose you have an accidental fire and it happens to rain. Having the accidental fire is unfortunate but its happening to rain is fortunate. Thus within ill fortune there is good fortune. 17.32 The purveyor of coffins desires human illness and plague, the hoarder of grain desires yearly drought and famine. 17.33 When water is still, it is level. When it is level, it is clear. When it is clear, it reveals the shapes of things. Nothing can hide, thus it can be used to make things correct. 17.34 Where streams dry up, valleys become empty. Where hills level off, gorges fail to flow. Where lips dry out, teeth grow cold. 17.35 Although river water runs deep, its silt lies in the mountains. 17.36 From the same plain white silk, one piece might be used for a morning cap and one piece for socks. The cap is worn on the head, but the socks are worn on the feet. 17.37 If you know yourself, you cannot be enticed by things. If you understand life and death, you cannot be put off by danger. Thus a good swimmer cannot be frightened by wading. 17.38 No blood relationship is closer than one's own bones and flesh, they unite joints and connective tissue. But when the mind loses control over them, they can turn around and cause harm to oneself. How much more so is that true with more distant relations? 17.39 The sage's relation to the way is like that of the sunflower to the sun. Although he does not begin and end with it, he faces it with utter sincerity. 17.40 The imperial reservoir overflows in times of flooding and dries up in times of drought, but the sources of the Yangtze waters are deep springs that cannot dry up. 17.41 An awning that is not framed cannot screen out the sun. A will that is not spoked cannot turn fast. Nonetheless, frames and spokes are not in themselves sufficient to be relied on. 17.42 Metal overcomes wood, but it is not possible to destroy a forest with a single knife. Earth overcomes water, but it is not possible to plug the Yangtze with one clod of earth. 17.43 When a cripple sees a tiger and he does not run away, it is not due to his bravery but because his situation is not conducive to it. 1717.44 What is tilted readily overturns. What is slanted readily topples. A person who is close is readily helped. A place that is damp readily gets rain. 17.45 When the rat is caught, the trap moves, when the fish is hooked, the float jerks, when the load is moved, the cart squeaks. 17.46 Straw dogs can stand, but they cannot walk. The snake bed plant resembles the maiwa plant, 18 but it cannot give off a scent. 17.47 No one who says Suyu had no potency or Wu Huo had no strength could fail to show disgrace in his face. No one fails to avoid revealing his own inadequacies. 17.48 Suppose the stride of a rabbit were made as big as that of a horse. It could keep up with the sun and pursue the wind. If a rabbit actually became as big as a horse, though, it would not be able to run at all. 17.49 In winter there might be thunder and lightning, and in summer there might be frost and snow. Nevertheless, the inherent tendencies of heat and cold do not change. Small differences are not enough to hinder constant principles. 17.50 The Yellow Emperor produced yin and yang. Shang Pian produced ears and eyes, Sang Lin produced shoulders and arms. 19 Nuo used these to carry out the 70 transformations. 2017.51 To talk all day, one would need the traits of a sage. To hit a bullseye 100 times in a row, one would need the skill of an archer Yi or a pengmeng. 21 But the present era does not praise them, such adherence to standards is reviled. 17.52 Both the ox's hoof and the pig's skull are bone, but the world does not heat crack them for divination. The reason why we must ask the tortoise if an outcome will be good or bad is because people have been doing so for years. 17.53 If you live near the Ao granary, you do not eat more because of it. If you live close to the Yangtze or the Yellow River, you do not drink more because of it. 22 You hope to fill your stomach, that is enough. 17.54 The orchid and the iris give forth their fragrance 23 but never live to see the frost. The owl 24 evades the weapons of his attackers, but his life ends in the 5th month. 25 17.55 The tongue or the teeth which decays first. The spear handle or the blade which dulls first. The bowstring or the arrow which snaps first. 17.56 The eel and the snake, the silkworm and the caterpillar in appearance they belong to the same category. But how they are liked or disliked makes them different. 17.57 Jin used the Chiwaji jade disc to acquire the states of Yu and Guo. 26 The wrong chieftainly used a beautiful woman to destroy the state of Jin. 27 17.58 Deaf people cannot sing, for they have no means to imagine music. Blind people cannot observe, for they have no means to discern things. 17.59 If you watch the archer, you will lose sight of his skill. If you watch the calligrapher, you will lose sight of his passion. If you focus on what is there on the outside, you will lose sight of what is preserved on the inside. 17.60 If nothing from ancient times could ever be improved, then solid wagon wheels would never have evolved into wheels with separate hubs. 28 17.61 If you get a female musician to blow through the reed pipes and another musician to put his fingers on the holes, even though they might keep the beat, no one could stand to listen to it. The music would lack its ruling form. 29 17.62 If you have the same illness as one who is dying, it will be difficult to be a good doctor for him. If you share the same way as a state that is perishing, it will be difficult to make plans for it. 17.63 When you make rice for your guest but eat greens yourself, you show that you prize reputation more highly than reality. 17.64 A nursing bitch will bite a tiger, a brooding hen will peck a fox. When their maternal concern has been aroused, they do not take account of relative strengths. 17.65 What makes the shadow crooked is the original form, what makes the echo distorted is the original sound. When emotions are divulged, the inner sentiment is easy to infer. When flowers are untimely, their fruit is inedible. 17.66 If you go to you can go by boat or go by carriage. The routes are different, but the destination is the same. 17.67 Good-looking men do not all have the same body. Beautiful women do not all have the same face. But they all are pleasing to the eye. Pears, oranges, dates, and chestnuts do not have the same flavor, but they all are satisfying to the palate. 17.68 There are people who rob and get rich, but not all rich people are necessarily robbers. There are people who are pure and poor, but not all poor people are necessarily pure. 17.69 Reed floss is like silk floss but cannot be used as floss, to pad winter clothing. Hemp fiber is not in the category of cloth, but it can be made into cloth. 17.70 If you come out of a forest, you cannot follow a straight path. If you traverse a pass, you cannot tread as straight as a marking cord. 17.71 The means by which ye shot far and pierced the center of small things was not the bow and arrow. The means by which Zheofu drove fast and far was not the reins and bit. 17.72 The sea retains what it has expelled, 30 Thus it is expansive. The will returns where it has gone, thus it is far-reaching. 17.73 Mutton does not long for ants, but ants are drawn to mutton because it smells rank. Pickling brine does not long for gnats, but gnats are drawn to pickling brine because it is sour. 17.74 By tasting a small piece of meat, you know the flavor of the whole cauldron. By suspending a feather over hot coals, you know the dryness and humidity of the qi. 31 By the small, you judge the large, by the near, you extrapolate the far. 17.75 A 10 qing reservoir can irrigate 40 qing of land, 32 But a 1 qing reservoir cannot irrigate 4 qing of land. The decrease in scale from large to small is like this. 17.76 Under the light of a bright moon you can see far, but you cannot write in minuscule. On a very foggy morning you can write in minuscule, but you cannot see beyond a few feet. 17.77 An artist concerned about a single hair will lose sight of the face. An archer who aims at a small point will miss the big target. 17.78 To dig out a rat hole and ruin the village gate, to burst a small pimple and erupt a great boil resembles a pearl with a defect, a jade with a flaw. Leave it alone and it will remain whole, remove it and you will spoil it all. 17.79 A bird that builds a nest makes its home in the dense forest because it is safe. An animal that digs a hole relies on a raised embankment because it is convenient. 17.80 Prince Kingji could run as fast as tailed deer and ordinary deer, and he caught rhinoceroses and tigers with his bare hands. Placed in a dark room, though, he could not even catch a tortoise or a turtle because conditions were not conducive to it. 33 17.81 Tang banished his ruler and enjoyed a glorious reputation. Kui Shu assassinated his prince and was greatly despised. What they did was comparable, why they did it was different. 17.82 Lu Wang encouraged the old to be vigorous. Xiang Tuo 34 caused the young to be proud. People admire those of their own kind. 17.83 What causes the leaves to fall is the wind that shakes them. What causes the water to cloud are the fish that stir it. 17.84 The markings of tigers and leopards attract archers, the agility of monkeys and apes brings hunters. 35 17.85 Moving one chess piece is not sufficient to display your wisdom. Plucking one string of an instrument is not sufficient to show your sorrow. 17.86 If a 3-inch pipe has no stopper in its lower end, the whole world cannot fill it. If a 10-dan vessel has a stopper in its drain hole, 100 pecks will suffice. 17.87 Using a bamboo pole to measure the depth of the Yangtze River and, when the bamboo pole has reached its limit, considering that the water's depth has been measured, is truly deluded. 17.88 Those who fish hasten to the deeps, those who fell trees hasten to the mountains, for they know what they hurry after will be there. In the morning, people hasten to the market, in the evening they stroll leisurely home, for what they sought is gone. 17.89 Sable fur that is mottled cannot compare with fox fur that is uniform. 36 A white jade disc with spots is not highly treasured. This describes the difficulty in achieving purity. 17.90 The ghosts of those who died in battles hate spirit shamans, robbers and thieves hate barking dogs. 17.91 It is easy to make sacrifices of millet and meat at an altar of the soil without a village, it is easy to pray for prosperity at an altar of grain without a state. 37 17.91 A tortoise lacks hearing, but his sight cannot be fooled, its quintessence lies in its clear sight. A blind musician lacks sight, but his hearing cannot be obstructed, his quintessence lies in his acute hearing. 17.92 The posthumous son does not yearn for his father, for there is no impression in his mind. He does not see his image as he dreams because he has never laid eyes on his form. 17.93 A cobra cannot grow legs, tigers and leopards cannot be made to climb trees. 38 17.94 A horse does not feast on lard, a hawfinch does not peck up millet, but not because they are abstemious. 17.94 A Wen Qin penetrated the Yao Pass, Wei built up its ramparts. 17.95 Starving horses in the stables are still and silent, but throw down some hay by their side and the covetous hart is born. 17.96 When you draw a bow and shoot, without the whole bowstring the arrow would not fly. But the portion of the bowstring that makes the shot is just 1 part in 100. 17.97 The way and its potency can be taken as a constant model, expediency cannot be taken as a constant model. Thus, someone who slips through the pass and flees the country cannot be allowed to return, an escaped prisoner cannot be rehabilitated. 17.98 A ring can be used to illustrate a circle, but it cannot necessarily be used as a wheel. A silk cord can be used to make edging for a sandal, but it cannot necessarily be used as a ribbon. 17.99 The sun and the moon do not rise together. Foxes do not form male twosomes. The spirit dragon has no mate. Fierce beasts do not form herds. Birds of prey do not pair off. 17.100 If you follow a marking cord to cut things, you will not make a mistake. If you suspend a scale to weigh things, you will not go wrong. If you set up a gnomon to look into the distance, you will not be confused. 39 17.101 If you subtract years from your age, you will incur jealousy from your younger brother. If you add years to your age, you will incur suspicions from your elder brother. Better just to follow principles and act according to what is suitable. 17.102 People do not see the dragon in flight. It can rise so high because the wind and rain serve it. 17.103 Where grubs proliferate, trees snap. Where fissures widen, walls crumble. 17.104 Things that are hung up will eventually fall down. Limbs that stick out will eventually break off. 17.105 If you endure freezing cold and do not die, you will not impair your sturdiness. If you face scorching heat and do not suffer sunstroke, you will not lose your sturdiness. But if you have never been unsturdy, you will lose your sturdiness. 17.106 When a bath is prepared, the lice console one another, when a large building is finished, swallows congratulate one another. Sorrow and joy are far apart. 17.107 When Liu Xing 41 saw the sweetmeats, he said, "These can nourish the elderly." When Robert Ji saw the sweetmeats, he said, "These can grease the door bolt." What they saw was the same, but how they would use it was different. 17.108 The silkworm eats but does not drink. In 32 days it transforms. 42 The cicada drinks but does not eat. In 30 days it sheds its skin. The ant neither eats nor drinks. In 3 days she dies. 17.109 When people eat river stones, 43 they die, when silkworms eat them, they avert starvation. When fish eat ba beans, they die, when rats eat them, they grow corpulent. Correlative categories cannot necessarily be inferred. 17.110 Tile is made with fire, but you cannot get fire from it. Bamboo grows in the water, but you cannot get water from it. 17.111 To scatter dust around and want to keep from getting dirty, to wrap yourself in furs and fan yourself too, wouldn't it be better just to wear appropriate clothes? 17.112 Dry bamboo has fire within it, but without a fire drill it will not ignite. Within the earth there is water, but without a spring it will not emerge. 17.113 The maladies of oysters and elephants 44 are the treasures of humankind. But human maladies, who would treasure them? 17.114 If you are so worried about the wine seller's profits that you do not buy his wine, you will just go thirsty. If you are so worried about the chariot driver's profits that you do not hire his chariot, you will not reach your destination. If you seize fire to throw it at someone else, you will be burned first instead. 17.115 If your neighbor's mother died, you would go over to shed tears with him. But if your own wife died, you would not weep publicly because people would consider it a violation of propriety. 17.116 In the country of naked people, in the western regions, birds and beasts and people do not avoid one another, together they all are as one. 17.117 If you grab a single piece of roasting meat, you will burn your fingers. If you stand 10 paces away from 10,000 dan of roasting meat, you will not burn to death. Though the same with respect to their chi, they differ with respect to how much is amassed. The difference between great and small courage is like this. 17.118 With a mat 6 feet long, if you lay it flat to be stepped over, even an inept person could do it. If you stand it on end to be jumped over, even a highly talented person would not find it easy. This is because the conditions have been changed. 17.119 100 plums is sufficient to make vinegar for 100 people, but 1 plum is not sufficient to make vinegar 45 for 1 person. 17.120 Forbidding the world to eat because 1 person was killed by food, forbidding the world to ride because 1 person was injured by a carriage, would be perverse. 17.121 If you use a hook, you are quiet. If you use brushwood, 46 You tap the boat. If you use a trap, you press it down. If you use a net, you lift it up. The means differ, but in getting fish they are the same. 17.122 When you see an elephant's tusk, you know he was bigger than an ox. When you see a tiger's tail, you know it was bigger than a fox. 1 portion appears, and the remaining 100 portions are known. 17.123 Small states do not fight in the space between large states. 2 deer do not fight when there is a rhinoceros close by. 17.124 If you assist the sacrificer, you get to taste the offering. If you aid a brawler, you get injured. If you take shelter under an unlucky tree, you will be struck by lightning. 17.125 Some call it a zhong, some call it a long. 47 Some call it a li, some call it a deng. 48 The name is different, but the reality is the same. Se meaning head lice and se meaning a musical instrument made from a hollow piece of wood. The name is the same, but the reality is different. 17.126 The sun and the moon want to shine, but drifting clouds can cover them. Orchids and irises want to endure, but autumn winds will vanquish them. 17.127 If a tiger has a cub that cannot grasp and tear prey with its claws, it will kill the cub right away because it is not fierce enough. 17.128 A jade seal carved in the shape of a tortoise is something the worthy turns into an ornament. Topsoil dispersed in the fields is something the capable turns into wealth. To give a drowning person gold and jade is not as good as a few feet of rope. 17.129 In looking at writings, if there is the character wine above, the character meat will certainly be below. 49 If year is above, month will certainly be below. We can pick them out according to their categories. 17.130 If you're covered with dust and you squint, that is a good reason, but if you cover your eyes before you have even gone out your door, that is contrary to the way. 5017.131 The butcher dines on coarse vegetables. The carriage maker travels on foot. The potter uses broken bowls. The carpenter lives in cramped quarters. The one who makes it does not necessarily use it, the one who uses it is not willing to make it. 17.132 With the wheel hub properly set up, each of its 30 spokes makes full use of its strength but does not detract from the others. If you take one spoke alone and set it into the hub, discarding all the others, how would it be possible to go 10,000 li? 17.133 If you walk at night, you close your eyes and stretch your hand in front of you. 51 If you cross a body of water, you untie your horses and take a boat. In doing things, there are appropriate actions, and there are things that should not be done. 17.134 Tangerines and pomelos have their native places. Framites, reeds and metaxys vines have places where they cluster. Wild animals with identical feet follow one another in migration. Birds with identical wings follow one another in flight. 17.135 Rainwater from the fields empties into the sea, words whispered in someone's ear can be heard for 1,000 li. 17.136 When Sachin walked slowly, people said, "Why is he walking?" When he hurried along, they said, "Why does he hurry?" When he galloped his horse, they said, "Why does he gallop?" Whatever he did, people discussed it. Many activities bring much criticism. 17.137 If the skin is nowhere to be seen, where will you look for the hair? 52 If you fear the head and fear the tail, what about all that is hidden in the body? 17.138 To want to see the 9 continents of the world. 53 When your feet have not gone even 1,000 li, to be ignorant of the sources of government and education but to wish to reign over myriads of people, these things are difficult. 17.139 If the prey is too obvious, it will be taken, if the bird is too leisurely, it will be shot down. Thus, great purity is as if sullied, great potency is as if deficient. 54 17.140 If you have never planted nor harvested, yet grain fills your warehouses, if you have never raised mulberry trees or silkworms, yet silk fills your sacks, then you obtain them through conduct not in accord with the way, and their use must be contradictory to the way. 17.141 The sea does not accept floating carrion, Mount Tai does not elevate the petty person. 55 The bladder is not offered up on an offering stand. 56 The piebald horse does not qualify for sacrifice. 17.142 Using a fan to cool yourself in midsummer but not knowing enough to put it away when winter comes, raising the hem of your clothing when crossing a stream but not knowing enough to lower it when you reach the other bank. Some people are unable to respond to alterations. 17.143 There are mountains that have no forests. There are valleys that have no wind. There are rocks that have no metal. 17.144 The people sitting in a hall all have different belt hooks, but they all hold their sashes closed in the same way. 17.145 Duke Xian of Jin's worthiness did not save him from being deceived by Lady Li. 57 Shu Sun Bao's 58 Knowledge did not save him from being tricked by Shu Niu. 59 Thus when Zhengzhan 60 entered Lu, the spring and autumn annals said, "A deceitful person is coming, a deceitful person is coming." 17.146 When the gentleman has wine, the rustic beats his ceramic jar. 61 Though the gentleman does not show approval, he also does not show scorn. 17.147 By nature, people find silk suitable, but when being shot at, they suit up in armor. Thus they find that what doesn't suit them serves very suitably. 17.148 When the spokes are set into the hub of a wheel, each meeting its respective hole, they do not pierce one another. It resembles officials, each of whom tends to his respective duties and does not interfere with the others. 17.149 Because he had avoided being shot by wearing armor, he wore it to enter water. Because he had crossed a river by holding onto a gourd, he used it to smother a fire. We can say he did not understand how to categorize things. 17.150 When the superior man presides over the people, it is like using a rotted rope to drive a racehorse, treading on thin ice with a jiao dragon beneath it, or entering a forest and encountering a nursing tiger. 17.151 Skillfully using others is like the feet of a millipede, though numerous they do not harm one another. Or like the lips and the teeth, the hard and the soft rub up against each other but do not overcome each other. 17.152 The beauty of clear wine begins with the plough and the spade, the beauty of fine brocade begins with the shuttle and the loom. 17.153 Rough linen when new is not as good as burlap, burlap when old is not as good as rough linen. Some things are best when new, others are best when old. 17.154 A dimple is attractive on a cheek, but on the forehead it is ugly. Embroidery is appropriate on a robe, but on a cap it is reprehensible. 17.155 Horse teeth are not ox hoofs. Sandalwood roots are not catalpa branches. Thus if you see the root of their singularity, the myriad things can be known. 17.156 When it is formed, a stone is hard, when it emerges, an orchid is fragrant. When they are young, they already possess these qualities, when they mature, they become obvious. 17.157 Propping it up or knocking it over, thanking him or scolding him, gaining it or losing it, permitting it or forbidding it, they are 1,000 li apart. 17.158 To dirty your nose but to powder your forehead, to have dead rats rotting in the courtyard but to burn incense in the palace, to go in the water but to hate to get wet, to embrace the odorous but to seek out the fragrant, even someone who is good at things cannot manage these. 17.159 Second sprouts are not harvested, flowering plants that grow large too early miss their proper season and wilt. 17.160 Do not say that things are unlucky. After all, a rice pot will not fall into a well by itself. If you pull out a hairpin and get a spark, why should you be surprised? 17.161 To prevent someone from crossing a river is possible, but if a person has already reached the middle of the river, it is not possible to prevent him from crossing. 17.162 Seeing a single stripe of a tiger, you do not know how fierce he is. Seeing a single hair of a steed, you do not know how well he runs. 17.163 Larvae produce dragonflies, tiny eggs produce mosquitoes, rabbit-tooth insects produce dragon ants. What things have for their making emerges from what cannot be reasoned. Those who do not know this are amazed, those who know this do not think it strange. 17.164 Bronze sparkles with green, gold sparkles with yellow, jade sparkles with white. An oilseed lamp shines dimly, a tallow lamp shines richly. You can use the obscure to know the obvious and the external to know the internal. 17.165 Simulated meat 62 cannot be tasted by the mouth, the appearance of ghosts and spirits cannot be perceived by the eyes, the pleasure of seizing a shadow cannot assume reality in the heart. 17.166 Winter ice can crack, summer trees can bear fruit. The right moment is hard to get and easy to lose. 17.167 When the trees are thick and luxuriant on all sides, you can chop them down all day long, and no one would know the difference. But when the autumn winds bring down the frost, in just one night, they all die of cold. 17.168 To force feed someone with a fever, to give cold drinks to someone with sunstroke, to pull on the rope to rescue a hanged person, to throw a stone to save a drowning person, although one wants to help, these things do harm instead. 17.169 Although you may wish to prevent runaway horses, you need not rush out the door for every rumbling cart, although you want to be careful when taking wine, you need not cling to your sleeping mat. 17.170 Once Mengben 63 reaches into a rat hole, the rats will die in no time, nevertheless they assuredly will bite his fingers because he has lost his positional advantage. 17.171 When clouds rise in the mountains, the bases of pillars grow damp. When the fulling fungus is dug up, the parasitic convolvula vine dies. 17.172 When one house is lost to fire, 100 houses burn. When liars plot in secret, the 100 names become sun-bleached bones. 64:17.173 When grain gets wet, it becomes warm. When clay pots are fired, they emit water. In water there is fire, in fire there is water. 17.174 Swift lightning breaks stone. Yin and yang erode each other. 65 These are natural forces. 17.175 When hot bath water is poured into a river, it does not increase its volume by much. When flood waters drain into the sea, although they cannot increase its expanse, they still add to what was already there. 17.176 A one-eyed net cannot catch a bird. 66 A baitless hook cannot catch a fish. If you meet up with a scholar and lack propriety, you will not catch his respect. 17.177 The convolvula vine has no roots, but it can grow. The snake has no feet but it can go. A fish has no ears, but it can hear. A cicada has no mouth, but it can sing. They all have what makes them so. 17.178 The crane lives for 1,000 years, so it may fulfill its wanderings. The mayfly is born in the morning and dies in the evening but gets its fill of enjoyment. 17.179 When the tyrant Zhao minced Earl May, King Wen plotted with the lords of the land against him. When the tyrant Ji showed no gratitude toward one who remonstrated, Tang had the people weep for him. A wild horse does not butt into a tree, a mad dog does not throw himself into a river, and even a deaf insect does not immolate itself. How much more so should people avoid self-destruction? 17.180 If you like bears but feed them salt, if you like otters but give them wine to drink, though you may wish to raise them well, this contradicts their way. 17.181 If it made you happy, you might destroy a boat to get its rudder. If it were your heart's desire, you might destroy a bell to get its clapper. 17.182 For every small disgrace Master Guan accomplished something glorious. For every 100 deceptions Sachin performed one honest act. 17.183 Where a target is displayed, bow and arrows gather. Where a forest's trees flourish, hatchets and axes enter. It is not that someone summoned them. The force of circumstance attracts them. 17.184 The expectation of a reward might lead you to rescue a drowning man, still, it also certainly benefits the drowning man. 17.185/186 If a boat is as likely to sink as to float, even a fool would not set foot on it. Even the famous horse Kiji, if he did not go when spurred on, or if he failed to stop when reined in, would not be selected by the ruler of men to travel a single li. 17.187 Those who criticize my conduct wish to be my friends, those who demean my goods wish to barter with me. 17.188 Water blended with water is not worth drinking. A one-stringed se is not worth listening to. 17.189 A fine horse will die from being tied up, an honest scholar will grow poor from being upright. A worthy is spurned at the court, a beautiful woman is spurned at the palace. 17.190 When the traveler thinks of his loved one on the road, the one at home dreams in her bed. When the kindly mother sighs in Yan in the north, her son misses her in Jing in the south. These are cases of essence going back and forth. 17.191 Where red meat hangs, crows and magpies gather. Where hawks and buzzards soar, throngs of birds disperse. Whether creatures disperse or gather depends on how they respond to one another. 17.192 If you eat someone's food, don't destroy his utensils. If you eat fruit from a tree, don't break its branches. 17.192 If you block up a spring, you'll go dry. If you turn your back on your roots, you'll grow rotten. 17.193 Interlacing brush strokes cannot extend far. Linked rings cannot be separated. The way to solve them is by not separating them. 17.194 Going down to the river and hoping for a fish is not so good as going home and knotting a net. 17.195 A moon bright pearl is an oyster's ailment but my profit. Tiger's claws and elephant's tusks are good for the animals but harmful to me. 68 17.196 An easy road and a fine horse make people want to gallop. Drinking wine and feeling happy make people want to sing. 17.197 To do what you know is right can certainly be called decisiveness. To do what you know is wrong can surely be called delusion. 17.198 An arrow's speed cannot carry it more than 2 li. But if you go 100 stages without resting, 69 you can go 1,000 li. 17.199 Sages live in the yin, the masses live in the yang. 70 Sages walk in the water where they leave no traces, the masses walk on frost where their tracks remain. 17.200 Different notes cannot be heard from the same pitch pipe, different shapes cannot be accommodated within the same body. 17.201 The peasants work hard, and the nobleman is nourished thereby, the foolish speak, and the man of knowledge selects therefrom. 17.202 If you abandon a flourishing forest to gather amid dead trees, if you don't shoot a swan but do shoot a crow, it will be difficult to make plans with you. 17.203 If a broad hill has no gullies, the spring and streams cannot be very extensive. But even a narrow creek can fill a wetland of 1,000 sheng. 71 17.204 If we see things in bright light, we can distinguish them as clearly as jade and stone. If we see things in dim light, we must remain in doubt. 17.205 To take the immensity of the world and entrust it to the talent of a single person is like hanging a weight of 1,000 jun on a single branch of a tree. 17.206 To carry one's son while climbing a wall is considered unlucky. Should one person fall, 2 will be injured. 17.207 Someone who excels at initiating things is like a person who rides in a boat and sings a sad song. One person sings and 1,000 others join in. 17.208 You cannot plow but you want grain, you cannot weave but you want fine clothes. Not to do the work but to look for the benefit that is hard. 17.209 If there are some who flourish, there must be others who decline, if there are some who wear fine silks, there must be others who wear coarse hemp. 17.210 There is a bird that stirs up the waves. 72 On account of this, even the Earl of the Yellow River avoids the tides, for he fears the bird's sincerity of purpose. 73 If even a single warrior comes forth ready to die, an army of 1,000 chariots will not take it lightly. 17.211 If a cobra bites you, if you treat it with the hedge and plant 74 you will recover. There certainly are things that are very harmful 75 yet can instead be beneficial. 17.212 A sage living in times of disorder is like being under a broiling sun in summer and waiting for dusk. Between the mulberry and the elm, the passage gets easier to bear. 76 17.213 Though the water is level, it will certainly have waves. Though the scale is correct, it will certainly have errors. Though the markings on a measuring rule are consistent, there are sure to be discrepancies. 17.214 What is not a compass or a square cannot fix squares and circles, what is not a level or a marking cord cannot establish the crooked and the straight. Thus, those who use compasses, squares, levels, and marking cords also have compasses, squares, levels, and marking cords within them. 17.215 Only when the boat overturns do we see who are the skilled swimmers. Only when the horses bolt do we see who are the good charioteers. 17.216 If you chew something and it has no flavor, you will not be able to get it down your throat. If you look at something but it has no form, you will not be able to get a concept of it in your mind. 17.217 With a rhinoceros and a tiger behind you and the pearl of the Marquis of Sui in front of you, do not try to grab the pearl. First avoid the calamity, and then go for the profit. 17.218 If you are pursuing a deer, you do not pay attention to rabbits. If you are making a deal for goods worth 1,000 pieces of gold, you do not haggle over a penny or an ounce of silver. 17.219 Bows must first be adjusted, later you can seek out the strong ones. Horses must first be trained, later you can seek out the fine ones. People must first prove trustworthy, later you can seek out the able ones. 17.220 The potter discards a rope, but the chariot maker grabs it. The butcher throws away a piece of scrap metal, but the blacksmith takes it. Priorities differ. 17.221 The brilliance of 100 stars does not compare to the radiance of the single moon. The light from 10 open windows is incomparably brighter than that from a single doorway. 17.222 An arrow from 10 paces can penetrate rhinoceros hide armor. At its limit, though, it cannot pierce the thin white silk of Liu. 17.223 Even something higher than Mount Tai cannot be seen if you turn your back, the tip of an autumn hair can be examined if you look at it. 17.224 Mountains produce metals but are cut by them. Trees engender grubs but are eaten by them. People generate affairs but are harmed by them. 17.225 Even a skillful foundryman cannot cast wood, even a master carpenter cannot carve metal. The form and nature of the materials make that so. 17.226 You do not carve a pure white jade, you do not inscribe a beautiful pearl. The basic material is more than enough already. Thus, if it strides forth without resting, even a lame turtle can go 1,000 li, if you pile things up without stopping, you can amass a great heap. 17.226 If a wall is made from earth, trees will grow from beneath it. They have no particular purpose in doing so, they just have an affinity for it. 17.227 The way of employing people is like drawing fire from a mirror, if you're too far away from the tinder, you won't get anything, if you're too close, it won't work. The right distance lies between far away and close. 17.228 Observing the dawn, he calculates the shift of the sun at dusk, measuring the crooked, he tells how far something departs from the straight and level. When a sage matches things up, it is as if he holds up a mirror to their form, from the crooked reflection, he can get to the nature of things. 17.229 Yang Zhu came to a fork in the road and shed tears because he could go either south or north. Mo disara silk and wept because it could be dyed either black or yellow. 17.230 The accord between one who leaves and one who stays behind is like a bell and a chime stone tuned in the same way. After 1,000 years of separation, they would still make the same note together. 17.231 Birds that are not harmful are not shot, even if they are nearby, birds that are a nuisance are not allowed to escape, even if they are far away. 17.232 If you buy wine that has turned sour, if you buy meat that is spoiled, and you still go back to the wine shop or the butcher that is not far from your home, you must really be someone who likes to seek things close by. 17.233 If you respond to cheating with cheating and deceit with deceit, it is like wearing a straw cape to douse a fire or digging a ditch to stop the water. Your problems will just proliferate. 17.234 Shi and Mao Qiang were not alike in their appearance, but in judging their good points, the world considered them equally beautiful. Yao, Shun, Yu, and Tang made laws that were different, but in winning the hearts of the people they were alike. 17.235 Sages raise matters at the proper time and accomplish things by following natural tendencies. When it rains hard, they prepare rain barrels, when it is dry, they construct an earthen dragon to pray for rain. 17.236 While weaving, a woman from Linza thought of her absent lover, thus the cloth she made was coarse. If there is a beautiful woman left at home, her cloth will be like unraveled threads. 17.237 Music in the Ji and Yu mode 79 is something the ears of the vulgar cannot comprehend. But if it is something with a catchy consonance and quick tempo, they will sit down and enjoy it. 17.238 If you walk past a storehouse with hands clasped behind your back, it would be strange if you did not have robbery in mind. Likewise, someone who has been disrespectful to a person's ghost walks past their ancestral shrine and sets its branches a-quiver. 17.239 Yang Chufu of Jin attacked Chu and saved Zhang. 80 Thus releasing a captive does not rely on removing the yoke. 81 It relies on attacking the one wielding the stick. 17.240 If the tree is large, its roots grip strongly. If a mountain is high, its foundation is firm. The longer your stride, the farther you will go. The bigger your body, the more spread out your bones and joints will be. 17.241 If a madman hurts someone, no one will resent him personally. If a small child scolds an elderly person, no one will hate the child. The intent to do evil is absent. 17.242 Wei Sheng's trustworthiness. 82 Was not as good as Sui Niu's deceit which saved his country. 83 Yet how much less admirable is one who is never trustworthy. 17.243 The one who worries over the father's illness is the son, but the one who cures him is the physician. The one who presents sacrifices is the celebrant, but the one who prepares them is the cook.